Hey guys, welcome back. As I mentioned in the last episode, I wanted to start on the combat system, or at least finish up the combat system over the next couple of episodes. And this episode is going to be the first part of that, where we're going to be changing how we can set up and define stats for our player and the other characters, say our slime or whatever we're fighting. They're all going to have stats. So I want to set up a way that we can easily define those stats per character using our character stats. We do have to change a couple of things to make it a bit more efficient, to make it a bit faster whenever we're searching for certain stats and all that. But it should be a couple of simple changes before we can get started on actually making the enemies attack and set up a little aggro ring. So if you get within that radius around that enemy, it'll chase you and start auto attacking. All very simplified, but definitely a good base for you to start doing some cool stuff on top of. So the first thing I want to do is, I know that it's not going to be a component-based thing that I'm going to be using. I'm not going to be setting up the stats in the inspector. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this component from my player. It's not going to be set up that way in this case. And Slime doesn't have one of those because, again, we didn't really have it set up well to begin with. So we couldn't necessarily use it as we were testing out the way the stats worked for the player. So I have it set up like this right here, and that's not how we want it, right? So we're going to set it up so that we also don't have stats set up in the inspector for the slime. It's going to be all set up in the code very easily. So let's go ahead and jump into, I'm going to go to base stat. And that base stat is going to get a couple of changes. The first one that's important, actually the only one that's important, is we're going to be giving stats a type. So we can define a set of stats. Let's say we know we're going to have power, we're going to have toughness, and attack speed, right? Power can be the attack amount, the attack power. Toughness can be some defense that we can calculate in. And attack speed is how often we can attack. In our case, the player, the attack is going to be based off the animation, but for enemies and stuff, it just depends on how you want to do it. And ours is going to be an auto attack. So every, say, 2 seconds, say we have an attack speed that's 2 seconds, every 2 seconds, the enemy will be able to attack the player if it's within range and if it is actually attacking the player. So to get this started, I want to go ahead and set up the enum. So we can use the enum. Not only is it more convenient so that we know we have a set rules of stats already, but we can also use it to quickly search for a certain stat. So right now we're doing it by just an index, I believe, which is not slow by any means, but we're going through the index, and then we have to check certain values of that way. But let's say I wanted to actually search the database for a certain stat, didn't know what index it was, I just know what stat I want. So I can say, okay, I want the attack power stat, and it will find that for me very efficiently because it's only using a set that it can be. So let me show you that. Using an enum that we've used before. It's going to allow me to define, briefly, it's going to allow me to define a set that a type can be. It's going to let me define types that whatever this is used by can be set to. It's a bit more than that, but that's all we need to know for this. So it's going to be an enum. I want to call it stat, let's call it base stat type. And I'm going to set up a few really fast. One for power, one for toughness, and then one for attack speed. Notice I have no quotation marks around these, and they are separated by a comma. And you'll see how that works here in a second. So now I'm going to set this up. It's going to be public base stat type. And that's referencing the type that we just created. We just created the type of base stat type. And this base stat type can be 3 values and 3 values only. It can be power, it can be toughness, and it can be attack speed. We know that, so that's good. It can be whatever you put there, but in my case, it can be power, toughness, and attack speed. So I'm going to call it stat type. And it's going to be a auto property just like our others. Now I'm going to take stat type, and I want to set it up in our JSON constructor. I don't even think we're using this one. I'm not sure what this is for. I think I just left it because I changed this one and I wanted to leave it just in case, but I don't think we're using it. So I'm going to set up stat type, which is going to be this dot stat type is equal to, I'm going to pass in another stat type to the base stat constructor. But in our case, we want it to be the first thing that we pass this constructor, base stat type. I just want to call it stat type. The first thing we pass in, and I want to set this dot stat type is equal to whatever value we pass in for stat type. Pretty simple. So now I know that this is going to be constructed using the JSON.NET library, right? So I want it to be able to go through and take the string representation of our stat type, which we'll have to set up here in a second. And we only have one item, no, we have 2 items, and let it serialize or deserialize it to an enum of the string representation. So let me try that again. So we're going to take a string representation of the enum. In this case, it's going to be, say, power. And like I said before, you know, that's the type of base stat type, which is represented by, as you can see as I hovered over it, by an index value. It has a 0, and this one's going to have a 1. That's going to have a 2. But it doesn't have a string representation. But we can create that, and there are built-in converters for that outside of JSON.NET, but we can also use the one for JSON.NET to take the string representation and make it equal whatever this is. So if we have power, it's power, toughness, toughness, attack speed, attack speed. We've done that actually already. I know why I'm telling you all this again, but this should work just fine for us. So if I go over the stat type property, it's going to be, we're going to go through, it's Newtonsoft. Actually, let's go ahead and just use these namespaces using newtonsoft.json, and we're going to be using newtonsoft.json.converters, I believe it is. So we go ahead and we're going to go to JSON. Let me try to think what this is called. JSON convert. I just used this converter. And we're going to take a type of, and the converter that we're going to be using is converters. Where is it at here? Maybe it's just string num. Oh, there it is. I'm using the namespace converters, which is actually not. There we go. And it was confusing me. So string enum converter, just like that. Now that I've got my mind together. So now it should take the string representation and be able to set it as the actual base type stat type. Ideally, we'll see. So now in items.json, I want to be able to add a stat type. Now notice this name matches the field, the property that we created called stat type. So it knows to map it to that property. And then I'm going to take, and this is going to be called power. Now you're probably saying, well, that just seems redundant. I'm saying stat type power, also stat name power, and I'll be doing that for the other stats as well. Well, you could take just the enum, say, or just the stat type in this case, and it would be generated as an enum, and use that, get the string representation, and actually use that for the name if you have your name somewhere in the interface. In my case, I don't think I'm going to have the names displayed in the interface. No, I do. I have it in the item details panel, and also I'm going to have it in the character panel. Don't know why I said that. But you can do it like I'm doing here, or take the actual stat type and convert it to the string and do that. But if you have something with a space in it, say power, I can say power like that with a space in it, and that'll be easily, I can just take that to a string and put it in the interface, be no problem. Put it in the UI, be no problem. But with stat type, it's going to be camel case, right? So I have to take this and I'd have to actually format it myself and put a space there, and that would be not hard, but I don't care to do that, so I'm not going to worry about it. We'll have stat type just like that, and then this is going to be stat type of toughness. So I'm not going to have vitality. That was just an example, and the name is toughness. And we now also have another stat that we can play around with. I don't need it, because again, I don't have to define all the stats for all the items. If it doesn't have it defined, it just doesn't use anything, which is cool. So I'm going to take stat type toughness, and it was called attack speed. Notice no speed, or notice no space. It matches the non-attack speed, just like that. I'm going to call it attack speed. Pretty cool. So I'm going to, now that I have that all set up, there shouldn't be any issues with it loading it in, building the database, with it being mapped to the correct things. But in character stats, this needs some work. This needs some love. So this is a mono behavior, which is what allows us to create an actual component from this. But we're not going to be doing it that way. So I'm going to get rid of that inheritance. We don't need that. And we still need the stats list. And we're not going to need to start, actually, because we're going to use a constructor to build our list out. So I can go ahead and get rid of this, because this is not fun. Let's just agree on that, okay? That's not fun. I'll get rid of that. And this is going to be changed because we're going to add in a way to search for the actual stat based on the type instead of based on the name. So I'm going to do a public character stats, just like that. Ooh. Just like any old constructor. And inside of this, we're going to be looking for values for the stats. And I want to set them up in a way so that we know what values are being assigned to what stat. So I'm going to do just int values, integer values, because that's all the values are as base stats, or just integer values. Then on top of that, we can add our stat bonuses. So it's going to be int of power, int of toughness, and then int of, what was the other one? Attack speed. So now when we're constructing our character stats per character, we know what value we're assigning to what stat. So we don't have to guess. But this does mean that for each character, we have to define all stats. But that's not a problem. If we don't want the stat, we just zero it out, right? It's no big deal. So now what I want to do is I'm going to add this stat to the list based on power, toughness, and attack speed. So I'm going to add each stat to the list whenever this character stats object is created. So to do that, I'm going to do stats.add. And I can do it this way. Or that wouldn't be very fun because I have to go through and search for each stat and then add it to it that way. I could just do stats is equal to a new list of base stat. And I can set the values when I define the stat list, just like this. So what I can do is I'm going to just go ahead and enter that down so I have some room to work here. And I'm just going to create stats from those values. So I'm going to do a new base stat. And the new base stat is going to be, first of all, we have to define the type of stat that it is. So we're going to go through base stat, which is our base stat class, the actual thing that has all of the values in it. Not a specific instance of base stat, just base stat. And then I'm going to go to the base stat type, which is the enum that we defined, which means that we can set it to power, we can set it to toughness, or we can set it to attack speed, whatever values that we created. And I'm going to say the first one is power. And then I'm going to pass it the, as we have it set up here, I'm showing that that's not even, did I have it set up? Stat type, base value, stat name. There's an overload that it's not showing me. So I'll just have to go with it. It's, what comes next? I would just be blind and didn't see it. Base value, so it's just going to be power. And then the name of the stat, which would be power. Okay, and now I'm going to add another stat the same way. So I'm going to take all this. I'm going to copy it. Going to make sure I add a comma. And add another stat. This one's going to be stat of, the next one is toughness. And I'm going to pass it the toughness value that this constructor is getting. And I'm going to call it, for this character, toughness. Now that might make no sense to you because I have a name in here already defined, which is a fair point. It's a fair point. And I may reconsider how I'm handling the name. But the name is only for the item. That's fine then, because I'm defining this for character stats. Yeah, so that's no problem. Okay, so next one is going to be, we've got attack speed, which is going to be attack speed. And I want to call it attack speed. So now our character stats can take whatever values that whatever character is talking to it and build a character stats stat list for each character. And that should work just fine for us. Let's test that out. Let's go into Unity, let it compile, and I'm going to go to Slime because we don't currently have a player component for our player, which we'll also be adding. I'm going to go to Slime, and in here, this is beautiful. I'm going to see, still haven't waited for them to attack. We'll get to that though. I'm going to go ahead and set up a character stats object for our slime. And does this have to be publicly accessible? I don't think it has to be publicly accessible because slime will handle when it receives damage, and it will also handle what damage it sends out, which is all it needs to know any formula. So if it has to, if I have to have a formula for the amount of damage that it does, it'll all be handled in here based on its stats, or any damage that it takes will all be handled in here based on its stats. So it could just be a private. It's going to be a character stats. I want to call it character stats. So now I want to go into my start method that's going to construct everything for us. And I want to go character stats, or character stats is equal to a new character stats. So we have this defined now, so we can actually use the constructor to create it because A, it's not a mono behavior, and B, we have a constructor for assigning values to our new object, which makes this very easy. So let me show you this. If I go in here and it can say, hey, go ahead and define the power, toughness, and attack speed. So I'll be like, okay, my power for the slime is 6, and my toughness for the slime is 10, and my attack speed for the slime is 2. And that's all we have, right? So now we have our defined stats for this slime. Slime now has attack, power, attack speed, and toughness. Pretty cool. So now if I were to go in here and want to use this for something, how would I do that, right? I don't know what stat is what. This constructor doesn't help me find the stat, only define the stats. So what I want to do is on base stat, or not base stat, sorry, character stats, we have an add stat bonus and a remove stat bonus. It goes through and it looks for an item based on its name, which is now stupid because of the way we have it set up. So I want to go ahead and add a get stat method. It's going to return a base stat value. Notice not a void, it's going to return a base stat. And it's going to be called get stat. And this is going to be looking for a base stat type, base stat type, and it's going to be looking for one called stat. Pretty cool. So it's going to return whatever it finds because it's looking for a base stat, and then it's going to return the base stat to whatever called it, right? So in this case, I want to go through and find a stat that shares this base stat type. So how can I do that? Well, I have a whole list of stats, right? I'm going to go through this.stats, and I'm going to do a find. Now, this is very similar to how we're doing the name, except now we're going to do it by base stat type. Oops, sorry. What's it? Oh, stat type is equal to, and we're going to say, is it equal to the stat dot, or just the stat because it already is a base stat type. Is this stat type equal to the stat type that we're looking for? If it is, it's going to return this out to whatever called it. It's going to return the actual stat to whatever called it. And since this is actually adding the stat bonuses onto the physical base stat, it's going to return it with those values already on there, so we can just do a simple get calculated stat value on the stat that we get back if we want to get those values. So now to use this, to show that it's working, we can go ahead and quickly, instead of doing all this, doing another loop through each one and finding the name that matches, we'll just do it a little bit differently. Notice how we're doing the stat bonus.stat name, and we're going through each stat. We still have to do that because we have multiple stat bonuses, right? But I can do it differently here. I can look at it by doing get stat and pass it the stat bonus. Oops, stat bonus. No, just the actual one right here, please. Dot stat type. And that's going to take the stat type of the bonus that we are currently looped on top of. It's going to go to my get stat method, and it's going to find the one that matches it and return it back down here so that we can then add the stat bonus to that stat. And I'll do the same for remove stat bonus. Seems a bit more efficient that way. That may work out better for us in the end, assuming everything works as expected. Let's go ahead and let that compile and make sure there's no issues. Okay, so now what I want to do is, that's all fine and dandy, but our player is not affected by it because our player's character stats were only driven by the character stats component, which we're no longer using. So if I want to go into Unity, I want to create a new C# script, and I want to call it player. It's about time we got our player defined as an actual object. It has a bunch of things on it, but nothing that's just, hey, I'm a player and this is what I have. It's just controlling a few of the player things. So what I want to do is open this up, and for now this is going to just consist of defining the stats for the player. In the future, and by that I mean over the next couple of episodes, it's going to handle it taking damage and health and all that, maybe a little healing on that just in case you have a potion or something, and also the stats, right? So, and dying and all that, but that's going to be for the next couple episodes, I would imagine. So I'm going to do a private again. I'm assuming this is going to handle on its own damage taken and damage dealt. Actually, it's not going to handle damage dealt. No, because that's going to be the actual weapon controller. So we are going to do it, let it be available to that for now. May change that, I'm not sure. So I'm going to do a public character stats and call it character stats. And now in our start method, we're going to set character stats to be equal to a new character stats, just like before. And we're going to start out with 10 of all stats. Okay, so we're going to have a 10 power, 10 toughness, and a 10 attack speed. That's cool. That's fine. Let's say you have different classes. I'm not going to say that's what we're going to be doing because we're not. But I'm just saying if you had different classes, doing it this way makes it very easy to just say, okay, well, he's going to start out with these stats instead of those stats. Doing it the component route would be the same way. You just attach a different component, or you modify the component once it's attached. But I like doing it this way. This just seems nicer. So it's pretty cool. So what if... is this being handled properly by the actual player weapon controller? Where is this being handled? Let's see. It's been a while since I did that episode. I don't know. Let's see. Weapon controller. We don't take into account any stats yet, do we? So we don't actually have a formula for handling stats yet. So we'll also have to do that. See, I can't remember. Do we not? I'm going to assume you guys do not have this. I think I just did this and have not covered it yet. Okay. Well, looks like this is just a bunch of garbage anyway. This just makes no sense. We'll just get rid of that for now. And, calculate damage value. It wasn't even using it, was it? When the slime gets hit, it needs an amount, right? Okay. How does it get hit? I don't even remember how this works. Okay, if it gets hit by the sword, so it definitely wasn't using that weird formula stuff that I had written there. Did you guys have that? I hope not, because I erased it. We're going to do a new one that's not terrible. To test this out, we have character stats and we have a reference to the character stats. We don't have a reference to the character stats. See, I'm trying to remember how this works. I think player weapon controller is passing the reference to it for us. Then it allows us to do it this way. So I can then do get stat. And let's say I want the base stat type of power. And that should then use the power of the actual character stat to do that, which makes no sense. We should use the power to calculate a formula that handles all that, which we will do, but for now, I just want to make sure stuff's working. That was very confusing for me because I don't usually do edits to that, to the code off video in the video version. Okay, so what we'll have to do is do a get component of player, which isn't attached, by the way, and then get the character stats that way. Because our character stats is on the component of player, we no longer have a component of character stats. So what I can do is, this is not going to work because there's no component on player of player. So I'm going to go to player and take player and drop it on there. And maybe that'll fix our issue there. Got an error here. Consumable controller is still getting the character stats. Why does the consumable controller need the character stats? It's funny how little I remember about this stuff. Which is fine if it needs it. I'm sure I had a reason for doing that. We're going to do character stats. Same way, it's just going to grab the character stats list in a different component. That's all I'm doing there. And that should work fine. Let's have another reference somewhere that I've forgotten about. Okay, so there's no errors. That's good. If I walk, I can equip my sword. Power dude. I forgot to take that off there. I'm going to equip it, and it works the same. I'm going to imagine that my stats are affected. I don't know if they are. Then I'm going to walk up to the slime here, and I'm going to attack him. Well, he died. I don't know how he died. So it's based on my character stats. One way I can test this to see if it's working how I think it is by taking the power level of power and just making it more. Get rid of dude. So when I equip, it should create base stat modifiers, if I remember correctly. It's been, gosh, probably a year since we did that episode. Attack. He died one hit. Yay! That means something's working. That's fun. That's good. I will know more about the stats and how they're actually interacting and working when we get character panel set up and we get things like enemy attacks set up and all that jazz, which we will get to in the next episode. In fact, the next episode will consist of making the enemies attack us back, which is something that should probably happen for this to be a game. They're going to be attacking us back, and we're going to have a radius around the enemy that if you get within that radius, they will chase you. And they will be another player or another nav mesh agent that will be able to navigate and path around the world. For now, at least, just to chase you around the world. Get out of the range, they will stop wherever they are, and they will just stay there until you come kill them or something. I don't really know what the plans are with that. Maybe once you get out of range, I can send them back home to where they were. I don't know. We'll see when we get there, but it's kind of winging it. We're winging it. And then, after that, I don't know. The combat system, as I have outlined in a couple of posts on the forum, is going to be simple. It's going to be very simple because I don't necessarily enjoy making them. It's not really something I enjoy writing. I don't really like things that have to feel good. And it's something that has to feel good. I like writing things that are just systems that just exist and do what they're supposed to do. And it's not really about feeling. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. If you like what you're seeing, guys, there's a great way you can support the channel. If you go to patreon.com/GameGrind, you can pledge to become a patron. And there's a couple of rewards here that are whatever. But the biggest reward is if you were to just become any level of patron right now, you'll get access to the Discord server where we can all just have a chat. And it's a place where we can offer support. And there's a few of us that hang out in there that offer support, and we just talk about our projects and stuff. It's a cool way to just keep in touch with everybody. And you get that from the first tier, the $1 tier. So if you want that, it's nothing to get that, right? $1 a month. Very simple. Freelancer, all it does currently is gives you access to what I'm calling a feed of exclusive tutorials, but there's nothing really there. There's a couple of things there, but it's not something I put a lot of time into. But it does upgrade your role in Discord. For now, there will be more in the future because I have a couple of things in the works, a couple of assets that I'm releasing on the asset store that will be included in rewards for my patrons. in the future, it'd be kind of like a good deal on them if you actually become a patron and you are willing to support the channel. And that way, if not, you can still just buy the assets outright on the store, right? Simple as that. So if you guys want to support the channel, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, obviously, is just to subscribe and watch my videos and share my videos. It really helps a lot. If you have any questions, go to forum.gogamegrind.com. It's the best place to ask your questions because we can share code and I can figure out what's wrong with your stuff very easily this way because of how easy it is to share code, and I can actually see your issues and we can share images that way. Comments on YouTube, hard to know what's happening because you can't share code with me. It's hard to share images. Just the best way to do it is go to this forum.gogamegrind.com. If you guys have any questions, please check it out. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.